Yes.
I suppose you can hear me, not see me. Yeah, let's go to the questions and answers. The first question is from Edi Skuru. Mr. Palstra, how does the amount of water flow during sea bream land-based rearing relate to the microbiological composition of water, and which is the flow rate which is suitable for healthy growth? Do you have any observation about this? We did not do any measurements on the microbiological composition. What I do want to stress, though, is that the effects that we see are the effects of flow. Certainly, that's mostly about the effects of exercise, but not only about that. Increased flow indeed change water parameters. There can be an impact on water quality, but also just the increased flow rates over the gills can already have quite beneficial effects on oxygen uptake. So it's exercise, but not only exercise. And the flow rate, which is most suitable for healthy growth, is 1 body length per second, as we suggest. But indeed, what I also told you is that we may need to refine that a little bit in order to avoid the deformations. So what we can think about is not to do that constantly, exercise, but a certain part of the day, which can be related to feeding times, for instance. So give them some time after feeding where they should not exercise. And on the other hand, you can also think about starting later in development with exercise, as maybe when fish are small, then this exercise load is still too heavy. I have to say, normally we investigate the effects of optimal flow that we investigate in the swim tunnels on health parameters of fish, which would be much higher than we would swim the sea bream at about 4 body lengths per second. But then for sure we will get problems with deformities, and also sea bream is not showing the benefits at such high speeds, but at lower speeds. So around 1 body length per second. So the speed is right, but the exact protocol may we may need to refine that. But it also, of course, depends on the batch. The number of deformities in the control group were already pretty high. Another question was like from an anonymous attendee. So cages located in places with currents of 1 till 2 body lengths per second will be a good recommendation. That's right. I would say yes, in principle, 1 body length per second would be good, also in the sea cage. However, there's one important aspect about exercise in the sea cage. Of course, in the ocean, you're dealing with quite unsteady flows and not the steady flows that we apply in a fish tank. That may have an effect, either negative or positive. That's surely something for the near future to investigate. And on the other side, fish will swim in your sea cages where they choose their own speed. As a physiologist, I would say you really have to force them to swim. But of course, swimming at preferred speeds also has already certain benefits. Finally, in the chat, there was one question by Dinos, which was about harvest time. You could expect that when you apply in the nursery this exercise regime of 1 body length per second, you do have a shorter production time. So when you bring them to the sea cage, the difference in size remains. So in that case, you could harvest the fish earlier than the ones that didn't get an exercise protocol. So yeah, those were the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Arjan. Dinos.
I guess I didn't phrase my question entirely correctly. What I meant was there an additional benefit while in the cages? Obviously, the fish were bigger when they completed the nursery, the land-based stage because of the activity. But was there an additional increase in their growth or in other parameters that made harvesting even faster? This was the question.
Yeah, sorry, Dinos. Well, what I said, the growth difference was maintained, so there was not an additional change in growth. What I do want to add, what is interesting, is that there were correlations between the activity rate and certain parameters. Like in this case, a higher activity rate, what I explained in the presentation, that was unstained behavior, so accelerations, that was negatively related to heart mass and intestine mass, and positively related to mesenteric fat and spleen. The correlations were weak. On the other hand, it's only 30 fish, so the fact that something pops up, it's already a quite interesting feature.
Okay, thank you. I will ask, I don't know, maybe Alicia or Dinos to moderate the debate, because at this moment I cannot read the question and answers on the chat. So you can help me.
There is only another question in the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bernardo?
Yes.
Yes, okay. There is a question from Mahdi from Egypt, and she's asking, are the feeding rates and number of meals different in fish cages than in terrestrial ponds? And well, I will say that the way of feeding is a bit different, and because at least now in most of the sea cages, they have automatic feeders and cameras in the bottom of the cages to check when the feed was reaching the bottom of the cages, and when they start with that, they stop the feeders. So it's a little bit different feeding in the terrestrial ponds, that you do it with or with automatic feeders or by hand, but checking exactly the quantity of feed that you want to provide, than in the sea cages that now they are feeding with automatic feeders and video recording when the feed was going to the bottom. So it is a little bit different between both. Yeah, I don't know if someone else wants also to contribute to this. And the ratios, the feeding rates were more or less the same, because usually the feed provider gives you the percentage of feed that you have to feed the fish depending on the weight of the fish. But in both cases, both in sea cages and in the tanks, is more or less the same. Yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. There is a question now for.
There are no more questions. No.
No, but in the question and answer there
is one question for Luca. Thank you for his presentation, and the question is, I would like to know what about feeding waste? There is no more feed waste after feeding with a single ratio?
No, we did not. We used a fixed level of feeding ration in order to don't reach let's say the satiation level that to go then to the waste. Of course, the speeding, the velocity in which you are providing the feed has to be calibrated. But yes, no, we did not waste any feed in our experiment. Okay, in real condition, that can be an issue to be, let's say, to check it. Of course, has to be related with the feeding behavior of the fish. But you have, of course, to be sure to be below the satiation level, and that the feed are still eating well under one meal. But we observe that also with 1 meal, the sea bream can intake an interesting amount of feed. That when we compare this study with previous study with similar formulation and with fish fed at Libiton, we were just we reach say an overall growth that was lower, but not that much lower. Okay, you don't explore the maximal growing performance of the fish, but it's interesting that you can, in real condition, maybe you can save some cost for feeding management and other things that we observe an optimal digestive condition, that more feeding frequencies in for example, in on-growing fish, that's when feeding 2 or 3 times, feed ingested. I have some noise. The feed ingested can have also interfere with the already digested feed. So that is an issue that can, and it was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Very
I would like to ask something to Luca, if I can.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so what I understood from your results and conclusions is that there are not significant differences whether you feed the fish with 1, 2, or 3 meals per day. Is that in this issue related with the perivestiral fat?
We also did not observe, we observe a slight tendency in decreasing the perivascular fat with 3 meal per day, but only in the high fish meal fish oil level. No difference we obtain in the low fish meal fish oil diet. But also the differences were just a tendency, is not real significant. So, did I answer to your question?
Yes, yes, you clarified. Okay. And I don't know if Yanis Kotsamanis would like to say something and discuss something about this question of the fat accumulation.
You know, the proper fish feeding and well-balanced feeding and the strategies and practice will avoid health and growth problems. So we have to be, you know, very careful when we are feeding the fish to avoid feed waste or overfeeding. We need to put more research on this topic in order to clarify and to identify biomarkers that could lead, could give us information and let's say direct us to avoid this fat accumulation in fish from, let's say, from the early stages of fish growth and fish feeding. Surprisingly, I have seen from the results from University of Murcia that fatty fish showed a decrease in some immune-related activities compared to the lean fish, and this is a little bit surprising for me. So I was wondering if in these trials we have to go deeper and to let's say to do more trials and experiments in order to investigate all of these aspects of growth and the immune response. Let's say it's a complicated problem, and many factors they are involved in this issue. I don't know if yeah.
And one comment. I don't know. Have you tried to weight the fat to see what is the difference in the in the carcass? What percentage of
Yes, the fat the fatty fish had a little bit more fat in the body, in their bodies. So, but the main, let's say, the main marker that could discriminate between fatty and lean fish is the perivascular fat, and firstly, and secondly, the condition factor. as I mentioned, patosomatic eaters is not a reliable indicator, and for the tested hormones, we didn't find any results, any positive, let's say, correlation between the fish classes. So I was wondering if other hormones, maybe reproduction hormones, could influence this phenomenon, the fatty, the fat accumulation. So probably we have to look at the search more deeper and in another hormones and metabolites, the differentiation metabolites that are differentiated between lean and fatty fish in let's say different organs.
Yeah, because I wanted to stress this issue of the fat because what I see from your slides and results is that the fat is accumulated periviscerally and peritoneally and not within the flex, which is what can be desired. This has probably this is probably an economic loss.
Excuse me? Yeah, yes, for sure, it's economically.
Perhaps you should have measured the fillet yield, the fillet yield. Perhaps it's a good measure that you haven't done. The muscle weight, as Bernardo told you, because probably there is also a difference between the lean and fat. Yeah, because the fat is accumulated in the perivisceral fat, but perhaps also in the muscle. So fillet yield is a good parameter to measure in this case.
Yes, probably you are right. You are correct about the muscle yield within the measure, because as I told you, this is a preliminary study. We are just looking to find the indicators and to organize the, let's say, the next trial. So yeah, I will agree with you that we should measure the muscle yield. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We need to move on to the next question or comments, because there are two more and we are 5 minutes away from closing. I think there's one is no question mark, so it looks like a comment from Magdi. For seabream fish, feeding rates differ in summer and winter. I don't know whether this is a question or a statement. And the other one is regarding the quantities and number of meals. It looks they are all linked. Perhaps it needs a clarification. So repeat, for feeding fish, for seabream fish, feeding rates differ in summer and winter regarding the quantities and number of meals. Is that
yes? Depends on the temperature. Yes, yeah. At lower temperature, you need to feed less than in summer temperature. Yeah.
So would be.
And also the other question was. Yeah, it depends on the temperature. The feeding rates usually when when the feed providers, the aqua feeders, send you the table with the percentage of feed that you have to give to the fish depending on their weight. It is also a column with the temperature. So at lower temperature, you feed lower quantities than at higher temperatures. Yes.
Thank you. We'll move to the last question, which I think is quite a challenging one. It's from an anonymous spectator. The question is it possible to conclude that the fish in the Mediterranean are being overfed unnecessarily? Who takes this question?
Maybe, but it would be better if we have here the fish producer, a fish farmer. It is true that before, when they didn't have these video cameras checking when the feed was going to the bottom, they were overfed. But now I think that they are controlling much more, mainly because it's economically it's economically good for the fish farmers to not spoil the feeds that are quite expensive. So they are now controlling much more the quantity of feed that they are giving to the fish. And that's why they put these new devices to feed the fish automatically and check when the feed was going to the bottom. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll take this. We'll keep this question for the second part with the stakeholders. And there is appear one question also anonymous for Dinos. Dinos, there is a physiological effect related to maturation. We know that there is a cumulative effect of fat, and we are changing the intake maturity rate. You know, what do you think?
This is a relevant question, I think, only for the males, for the majority of the production, because the majority of production is harvested before 2 years old, and neither sea bass nor sea bream mature as females at 2 years old. So males, of course, all sea bream are males when they're 2 years old, and they will mature in December, January, February, March of the year. So if you have them in your cages, they will mature and they will develop gonads, and they will divert energy from growth to gamete production. And same for the sea bass. This was a major issue earlier on for those who are older, and they remember when the industry was producing 90% male sea bass before we learned that early life rearing temperatures affect the sex ratio, they actually induce masculinization, the high temperatures. So at that time it was quite relevant, and it is also today, because as the breeding selection programs go on, and of course the first target of breeding selection programs are rate of growth. So that means that the fish will grow faster, and because reproduction is more related to size than it is to age, once the fish reach a certain size and a certain nutrient state, they will start building gonads. So it is relevant, and it will always be relevant as long as we're trying to push fish to grow faster, and we give them more nutrients, more appropriate diets to grow. So yes, during the time of the reproductive season, which is in those two species, I would put it in December, January, February, and March. There should be an accumulation of fat in the beginning of the season, and because the fish will not spawn, they will not release any of the gametes, this accumulation will maintain. They don't use it up. Usually wild fish, when they start going into spawning, reproduction, they start releasing gametes, the perivisceral fat, and also some fat that is usually that could be associated with the testes, will start being absorbed, utilized. But in the case of on fish in captivity, because they don't spawn, because there's no females ready to spawn at that time, this accumulated fat, perivisceral fat, and perigonadal fat will maintain. Okay. So I don't know what else. Let me see the bottom part of the question. And we're changing the intake maturity ratio. I'm not sure what you mean if we're increasing the maturity ratio. Like I said, with better nutrition, with faster growth, we'll have more maturation. So this is something that if we want to prevent it, there has to be breeding selection programs that will target at the same time faster growth and late maturation, which of course this is contradictory because maturation is related to fast growth. So I'm not sure how it's done from a genetic point of view, but I heard that it can be done. It's just difficult because you're trying to select for two characteristics that are extremely related and they're contrary to each other.
This is very interesting, Dinos, and we take note of that for next week, which is the genetic, the webinar on genetics, and I think that will be an excellent question. So we can put it to the floor. There's no more questions. No, neither anything.
I just wanted to make a comment. It's related with the question that was made before, the saying or asking if we were feeding too much in the Mediterranean. So, trying to comment on this, I will turn to the origin of this question, is why we feed and why someone would like to feed more. I suppose that the answer is because we want the fish to grow faster and more. And traditionally, the feed and feeding has been the main, let's say, strategy to achieve these objectives. Well, we know that if we feed too much, we can have some side effects, which is this question of fat accumulation, which we have seen this in sea bream and sea bass, but before we saw that in salmon. In this work package, this issue has been studied, and let's say some solutions are provided because this is a multidisciplinary question. We have seen these very good results presented by Arjan, how management controlling swimming can help to promote growth and to have more homogeneous fish, which is quite important to avoid this dispersion on the growth. I remember that 10, 20 years ago, we had this discussion about saying, okay, it doesn't matter if maybe we are feeding too much and the feed conversion rate is not so good because we are shortening the growing period. And then there is this question of the economic issue, whether the cost benefits, it is good. But now what we see is that there might be other strategies to get better growth, more homogeneous growth, swimming or genetics has been explained by Dinius. Also health management and welfare. All of this has implication in fish growth and efficiency, and so technical performance.
If I may interrupt for a second, Bernardo.
Yes.
I think what is also very interesting, particularly concerning sea bream, is the fact that they crunch. Talking about overfeeding, they crunch their feed, and in that sense, they're not very efficient. So that has consequences for the FCR, and maybe that's an important target for future investigations. Perhaps we should breed for non-crunching sea bream.
Are already working with that. No, wait. The feeders, the aqua feeders, are now working on that, and they are reducing the size of the pellets. And they are trying, at least Skretin is trying with 3 millimeters pellets, more compact, to avoid its crunching from the sea breams. So they are already working with that. They are more advanced than we think.
Yeah, that's good to hear. But maybe it needs like a more integrative approach. Of course, from that angle, it's very important. But there could be more entrances to work on that.
And one question for you, Arjan, because I think I did it 1 year ago. You're measuring the speed of the water in body length per second. That is right. But how, for me, this is a little bit abstract. What is the relationship between, I don't know, speed in the current typical water current speed? Have you, I don't know, how many knots or how many?
Well, of course, that depends on the size of your fish. So, if you're talking about, well, 1 body length per second is easy, because if you have a 20 centimeter sea bream, you should have a flow of 20 centimeters per second. How that works out in the sea cage, like the question I got before, that's difficult. You have to deal with tides and with unsteady flows. and how fish perform in that, it's you cannot control that, or at least when you have a mobile sea cage, you can move it around, so then it becomes more controllable. So that's an interesting point of view. But still, some species will deal well with unsteady flows. Imagine salmon. I can see salmon dealing well with unsteady flows. How sea bream, sea bass will deal with that, we don't know. Question of investigation.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Arsen. We have a very challenging question, perhaps the last one, again, a very anonymous, very active anonymous person there. This question could be also for Work Package 6, but it is like that. Good reflection. If the subsides, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, the economical help for fishing are eliminated, the sale price will be similar to aquaculture production model with longer duration, better quality, more efficiency and more sustainability. Now it is necessary for the consumer to accept the extra cost, but so this is brings into on the table a few issues, which will be fishing products and aquaculture products, and whether the public health which fishing gets is how we will play here, and the acceptance of the aquaculture products for the consumer, and acceptance the product as a better product. Is there on your, from the Work Package 2 side, is there any comments there you want to do to partially perhaps reply to this question, which is more complex than just quality?
Well, I think this is it's a very political issue. The fishing industry is huge over the world. It's a very, very powerful industry. And I think it will be very difficult to expect that something like this will happen. I mean, because of aquaculture, it's not going to happen because of aquaculture, but it may happen, I think, because of concerns on the sustainability of the fishing industry. I think I assume some of you or many of you have seen this documentary Seaspiracy.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm not saying that it's true or it's all true, or I don't know how much is true, but it's quite obvious, I think, to all of us that have been in this field and have been hearing statistics and knowing what's going on, that I'm not sure if there's sustainable fishery today anywhere. So from this point of view, then maybe in the future, governments will stop subsidizing the fishing fleets in order to cut down on the fishing effort, because that's the only way to reduce the effect on the wild stocks. But having said that, we have to have in mind that we rely on fish meal and fish oil from the sea, and I'm assuming those industries of the small pelagics are also subsidized, so the cost of our fish meal will increase even more. I'm not sure if it's going to be more than the benefit that the industry will get from a higher price from the wild harvest, but that has to be taken into consideration also. But yeah, I think because of the pressure on the wild fishery, subsidies may become an issue, but not because of aquaculture.
Yeah,
that's my feeling.
Yeah, it looks like more like a sustainability, climate change issue probably, and much microeconomically complex than that. But it could have side effects into aquaculture and aquaculture's future, even also with the trophic level of the fish we go for.
Right.
So
well, just to finish, don't see. I mean, many of these issues are going to maybe to be discussed in other Work Package seminars, like the Work Package 5, which is dealing with new product development, and they started with a very interested survey to consumers about, for example, the appreciation of sea bass improving products from aquaculture or from fisheries. On the work package 6, there are questions dealing with production strategies, marketing plans, and in the work package 7, questions about governance and social acceptability. We will have time enough to discuss about those issues in the forthcoming webinars. Probably more focus on those aspects. I could be speaking for a long time, but that is not the purpose of this today. So I think that we should close. Just to remind all the attendees that this has been the first webinar of the Medate webinar series. That next week we have a webinar about genetics and breeding. I'm sure that some of you would like to to get first-hand information about the conclusions and results on this. Maybe Dolores, you would like to close? Or?
Thank you. Yes, you say thank you to all presenters, and thank you all panelists which have and spectators who have asked questions. We'll keep your questions, and Bernardo said perhaps some of them will be recycled into other.
Just a practical thing. We were asked if this webinar is going to be made available. It will be. We are recording the webinar, and we will make the webinar available at the web page of the project.
Perhaps we should switch on the cameras and take a picture, Bernardo.
I don't know if the participants can switch on the camera because this is the the webinar. So no, we don't have that. The panelists, yes. I mean, I can take you a photo. Let me take you a photo.
And you can do it from your computer. You don't have to use your camera.
But it's nicer to do this.
You're such an old-fashioned person, huh?
Just a print screen, Bernardo.
Yeah, but most cameras are switched off.
The question is, I have 3 screens. 1, 2, 3. So,
okay.
Okay. So thank you very much to all of you.
Bernardo, please, before we close, could you explain the next part, the closed session?
Yes. Well, we are closing what is the open webinar for any interested person that has participated. Thereafter, from 12 to 2, we have a restricted work session, a workshop only for those task leaders that are responsible of the recommendations, with a team of invited stakeholders. That is starting to, well, at 12 with another link. So at 12 we are meeting again. For all the attendees, again, thank you very much for your questions. I think that some of you had wanted to be in contact with one of the panelists. I see that Luca was asked to be contacted. I am sure that the other panelists, if for the participants, if you have questions, you will be very welcome to contact them. So I think that's all. So let's have a break, have a coffee, and then what we are invited to participate in the next meeting. So we'll be there in 45 minutes. Okay.
Another link, remember, it's not the same link.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers to everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye.